Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Finally on.
Good.
All right, hey everybody, thank you for making some time to hear from us tonight. I think we're going to get started. We're also recording this so we can share it with Dorothy to share with the rest of the board later. And you can also follow up if you have any questions. So we'll just get started. So tonight I'm presenting to you about zoning for coastal flood resiliency, which is a citywide zoning text amendment that is meant to help buildings in New York City improve their resiliency and be more resilient to coastal storms. Next slide, please. So before diving into the zoning itself, just want to share a few notes about tonight. So at any time you can submit a question with the Zoom Q&A feature. After the presentation, if you have any questions, you can submit them that way or just unmute your mic and speak. And like I said earlier, if you have questions after tonight, feel free to get in touch. Next slide. So when we're looking at New York City's coastal flood risk, we tend to focus on the area that FEMA designates as high risk. This is the area that has a 1% chance of flooding in any given year. In Brooklyn, about 165,000 people live in this area. However, during Hurricane Sandy, close to half of the city's moderate risk zone, or the 0.2% annual chance floodplain, was inundated, and an additional 320,000 Brooklynites live in this area. With climate change, we expect that the floodplain will continue to expand. By the 2050s, today's moderate risk flood zone will likely be at high risk of flooding. Next slide, please. So to address the wide range of challenges that come with flood risk adaptation, the city needs to pursue a strategy that involves multiple lines of defense. So our work includes city planning, many other agencies in the city, working on coastal defense strategies, protection of inland infrastructure like drainage and transit, and emergency preparedness. Zoning for coastal flood resiliency is just one tool in the toolkit, and it specifically is helping to advance the resiliency of the city's building stock. Next slide. And this proposal builds on two zoning text amendments that were put in place soon after Hurricane Sandy in 2013 and then in 2015 that were meant to help coastal neighborhoods recover and rebuild quickly. Those zoning texts, which were passed as temporary measures, are beginning to expire. City planning conducted years of research and outreach, which uncovered issues that communities are still facing. And I want to especially mention tonight the Resilient Neighborhood Study in Canarsie. The outreach and the community input that DCP got from that study was really important in developing our zoning for coastal flood resiliency proposed rules, especially rules about measuring building heights and for non-compliant buildings. So everyone in Community Board 18 who contributed to that work was really, really crucial for what we are presenting to you tonight. This proposal is meant to make those temporary provisions permanent and to expand them so that the things that didn't work so well from the 2013 and 2015 text are improved going forward. Next slide. So after the process of studying the floodplain and doing community engagement with more than 3,000 New Yorkers across all 5 boroughs, we were able to establish 4 overarching goals that help us move from a sandy recovery to longer-term resiliency. First, we know that the floodplain community wants to be able to prepare buildings for flooding, even if they aren't located in FEMA's high-risk flood zone, especially those people who live in areas that face moderate flood risk and experienced inundation during Sandy. Second, we know that people also want the option to raise their occupiable space a little higher than the current flood level that FEMA projects. Again, this is because they've seen that higher flood levels are possible and expect that risk to grow in the future. When people are undertaking big investments to retrofit their buildings and their homes, they only want to have to do that once. So instead of aiming for something low and then needing to do it again later on, just do it a little higher in the first place. And the third goal, residents and business owners that are seeking options to invest in resiliency gradually so it's more affordable. So being able to adapt over time and not have to undertake everything all at once. And this involves options like moving mechanical equipment to a higher elevation without triggering all of the rules of flood resilient construction. And finally, we know that we also need a way for the city to be more nimble in responding to future events that might require rebuilding homes or other forms of recovery. Next slide. All right, so goal number 1, which is about the applicability of these proposed zoning rules. So it's important to note that these regulations are optional and they would allow buildings to meet or exceed flood resistant construction standards that are set by FEMA and that are enforced by the city's building code today. Next slide. So ZCFR would expand the applicability of the current zoning text to more buildings that are also expected to be flooded in the event of coastal storms by allowing any lot located within the 1% or the 0.2%, so that high risk and moderate risk flood zone, allow all of those places to have access to the special rules that would help enable resiliency at the building level. And you can see how that looks in Community District 18. So on the left side with just the yellow, that's what where these rules would be available now. And on the right side with the yellow and the orange is where they would be allowed under the proposed changes. Next slide. Goal number 2, this section is includes regulations that would be available only if the building fully complies with Appendix G of the building code, which is the portion of the building code that outlines the flood resilient construction standards. And there are 5 separate subcategories in this goal. Next slide. So starting with the building envelope, this set of rules would allow building owners to physically elevate habitable spaces and other building support features above expected flood elevation by offering more flexibility with bulk regulations like height, yards, and floor area, so that buildings can be made resilient without putting homeowners in the hard position of potentially having to choose between keeping their whole building versus making their home resilient. Next slide. So looking at ground floor regulations, these rules would help promote good long-term resilient design of buildings and how they meet the sidewalk. Through floor area exemptions, the proposed rules would encourage internal access and active use at the sidewalk level so that floodplain communities can continue to be vibrant and accessible. So if building owners, homeowners are looking to elevate, means that it'll still be a pleasant experience to walk around. You're not just seeing a bunch of blank walls, or it's still an active street. Next slide. To ensure that resilient buildings contribute to their surroundings, we also would be including a set of streetscape requirements so that the ground floor level design of resilient buildings is improved. Next slide. So this next set of rules, it's specifically for neighborhoods and buildings that might be a bit older or may not fully comply with zoning code, which puts residents in a hard spot if they're trying to undertake resiliency improvements. So an example of that, homes that are currently located on lots that may not meet the minimum lot size, and so the homes may not comply with the floor area or yard regulations. This proposal would set up a framework where these lots and other buildings that don't conform with our use regulations or don't comply with our bulk regulations, they would be able to retrofit without bumping into zoning constraints. So typically, if you have a building that doesn't adhere to the rules right now, it's very hard to make modifications, but in this case, people would be able to make their homes more resilient despite the fact that their homes may not comply with all the zoning rules. And this is one of those proposed rules that was really influenced by the Canarsie Resilient Neighborhood Study. Next slide. So last, in goal 2, with such a diverse building stock and a lot of different conditions in the floodplain, we recognize that not all buildings in all situations would be helped by these as-of-right rules. So the proposal would continue to offer discretionary pathways through the BSA special permits to ensure that unique situations are able to meet standards for construction in the floodplain. Next slide. All right, goal number 3. So this set of rules is what we call the partial resiliency strategies. So these are the ones that allow people to undertake incremental steps towards resiliency, to do one thing at a time without requiring the structure or the property to meet all the rules in the building code that regulate flood resilient construction. Next slide. So in DCP's outreach, we learned that raising mechanical equipment is often a first step to make buildings more resilient. And so this proposal would allow more options for the placement of equipment above the flood level, either on top of roofs, which is a common strategy for larger buildings, or in a separate structure on the property. Next slide. A lot of the floodplain in New York City contains businesses that offer neighborhood services or a big part of the city's industrial economy. So many of these businesses can't really be elevated or completely dry floodproofed, and they may need to prioritize what kinds of spaces would be raised above harm's way. So such spaces can offer the necessary support immediately after a storm and reduce disruption to the business. Next slide. Last, in many areas of the city, zoning requires waterfront sites. Oh, excuse me, let's jumped ahead. This is actually not about waterfront sites. So this is a rule that would allow flood protection measures to be implemented as permitted obstructions. So you can see these little, I don't know what to call that, the little out structure coming out of the building. That would be permitted for your building or for your home. Next slide, please. This is waterfront sites. Sorry about that. So the zoning requires waterfront sites with certain types of development, certain uses to provide public waterfront access. And in many sites at the water's edge, the grade of the waterfront site can't be modified. This proposal would allow flexibility so that the grading can be changed and allow for soft shorelines, which will help account for future sea level rise. Next slide. So this final goal, which is different from the previous rules, because this includes regulations that could be deployed over the whole city instead of just at the floodplain level. So these are things that could be used in case of an emergency situation, like Hurricane Sandy, like some other type of natural disaster, or like what we're experiencing right now with COVID-19. Next slide. So one of the things we learned from Sandy was that the storm's effects can go beyond the floodplain, especially across our energy system. So this proposal would allow power systems like generators, solar energy systems, fuel cells, and batteries to be considered permitted obstructions in open areas across all zoning districts. Next slide. And to ensure that all areas of the city can easily provide ADA access, the proposal would also classify both ramps and lifts as permitted obstructions in all required open areas to facilitate accessible design. Next slide. Another important issue is how disasters, especially those that require evacuation, impact vulnerable populations. Nursing homes have populations that require continuous medical care, and research shows that this dependency on that medical care can be strained whether nursing homes either shelter in place or evacuate prior to a storm. Therefore, the city believes that it would be appropriate to limit the growth of nursing homes in high-risk areas to lessen the health consequences and logistical challenge of evacuating residents in these facilities. So this proposal would prohibit the development of new nursing homes in the high-risk flood zone, that 1% annual chance flood zone. And existing facilities in these areas would still be able to make enlargements or improvements, including those that help with resiliency. Next slide. Last, Sandy showed us that it's a lengthy process to update zoning, and that's not necessarily compatible with quick disaster response. So the proposal includes rules that could be made available to facilitate recovery in future disasters, natural disasters, or health crisis, economic hardship, So the first of these rules would give property owners who hold special permits and authorizations an additional length of time so that they can complete their original plan of construction on a longer timeline. And the second would support businesses that don't conform with zoning use regulations by allowing them more than 2 years, which is the current limit of time where the business can be discontinued, allow them more time to return to operation after pausing their operations. So next steps, those are all of our proposed rules. And in terms of next steps, this text amendment has been referred out to all the community boards in the city, to borough presidents, and we're asking for your feedback and for community board recommendations by December 28th. And you can find more info about the project on DCP's website. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Judy, do you have any questions? Maria, do you have any questions? Judy, I think you're muted. Can you guys hear?
Okay, can you hear me?
We hear you now.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I have a question. For elevation of the homes, who would be responsible for the elevation?
It would be the homeowner.
The homeowner?
Mhm.
And do you know how much the home elevations will cost?
We know that it's very expensive. So the city, especially the mayor's office of Resiliency, has been and is continuing to advocate for more assistance for retrofits like this. They're advocating for more assistance at the federal level. There are some assistance programs that can help people with some of those costs. I know it's not everything, but it can help a little bit. And those are Flood Help New York, and the Department of Housing Preservation and Development also has a program, Home Fix, which provides loans. And like I said, I know that's not going to necessarily cover everything, but hopefully if it's something that someone wants to pursue, those programs can help a bit.
Okay, and another question, I want to question about the water site areas, the waterfront sites.
Yes.
I noticed that the picture that you showed, how they have it so that if there's water coming in, not that one, this here area over here, but how they have this here waterfront area, this would help along the Fresh Creek area to have it set up like this, because this would stop some of the impact of the flood coming into the homes. Because I feel that if the city did most of the work that they should do along the waterfront end, we wouldn't have so much of an impact if we do have a flood. Because some people had floods from the sewer and other people had floods from the creek, the bay, and the basins. So if they shore up those waterfront areas, I think that would cut down some of the impact of a flood.
Yeah, the city is doing that in some parts of the city. I don't know of any projects currently happening in the Fresh Creek area, but I can double check and get back.
Yeah, because Canarsie was hit very hard, and it seems like Canarsie is always the last on the list, from Howard Beach, from the Rockaways, from Jamaica Bay. It's like Canarsie is the last on the totem pole when it comes to the waterfront areas. And our homes, and we pay as much for our taxes, property taxes, as all these other areas. And I don't know why Canarsie is always on the bottom of the list when it comes to fixing up the waterfront. And I've been advocating for this before Sandy. Before Sandy hit, if they would have started doing this with the bulkheads, we wouldn't have had the deterioration that we have right now from Sandy.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a real issue. I would love to talk to you maybe after tonight about where around Fresh Creek you think would be.
Yes, I would appreciate that, because I'll text you my telephone number, or Dorothy have my information. She could
Sure.
forward it to you.
And
Yes.
this doesn't necessarily mean something will happen right away, but it's really good for us to know
Look,
where.
I've been doing this for over 20 years, so I know it's going to take time.
Okay. Thank you. And there's a question in the chat box. How soon would this go into existence, given the existing problems from from Superstorm Sandy? In spring 2021, so about 7 months from October, which I have to do some counting.
May.
Into May. Thank you, Tom. So in May 2021.
You said May 2021?
Mm-hmm. That's when it's expected to finish the public review process.
I think Maria has her hand raised.
I spoke already.
Oh, that's you. I'm so sorry.
Judy, do you have any questions?
No. Hi. I just wanted to make a statement.
Mhm.
I agree with Maria, because the problems in Canarsie are unique
Mhm.
because of the landscape. Okay, and I also think it's because of the how should I say, the demographics.
Yes.
And, I don't want for us to have a problem like in a disaster in the future. And, for us to have the same problems, the reoccurring problems. So, I'm very concerned about that. And I agree with Maria's statement.
Okay, thank you, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thanks. Sally, do you have any questions? I'm not sure she can. Maybe not. It's not. Judy, you have another question?
Yeah,
No questions.
Another statement, because for an area like Southeast Brooklyn, Canarsie, to take another hit, of the magnitude that it did, it will be even more psychologically damaging to the residents. And not only the residents, there are a lot of rentals in Canarsie, and people will be displaced. So I am concerned. What do you think, Maria?
Yeah, I agree with you, Judy, because when FEMA came in, FEMA explained to everyone what we needed to do as far as shoring up our homes to make our home more resilient. And like with the outlets, had us to put the outlets up higher, no outlets on the floor level. If you have anything in your bottom floor, your basement, you can't rent out your basement. And to make sure everything is elevated and stuff that could be moved in, because the majority of the people from on my end, where I'm at on the by the cul-de-sac, by the water only hit our basements maybe 3 feet. Whereas in other parts of Canarsie that was hit with sewage, they had water up to 6 feet. Some of it even went up to their second floor. Ours didn't hit that high. But if we get another, like you said, incident, it could be more devastating. And the people just can't afford to do that anymore, can't go through that anymore. And I'm afraid that they will be pushing out the mamas and the papas, because most of the people that live in Canarsie over here now are seniors, retirees. And we have nowhere to go. And we cannot afford to have no elevation. You're talking about $200,000, $300,000 to elevate their homes. And our homes is semi-attached. So that means that both homeowners have to raise their homes. That's impossible. That's impossible over on this area. And this area, and the most of the people in this area are retired. They don't have $200,000 laying around, and they can't afford on a fixed income to get a loan and to have that done. They're not taking that into consideration. I don't know where they think we're supposed to get that kind of money from, even to make a loan. It can't happen.
I agree, Maria, because I think that when these issues arise with the zoning and planning and with all the ancillary services combined, the human element is not thought of as extensively as it should be.
Exactly.
Because you have to put yourself in a person's place. There is a single mother with 2 teenage children. She lives on Avenue L in Canarsie. Her house was flooded from Superstorm Sandy. She has yet to recover what she was offered. She found out that, you know what, something doesn't smell right.
Right.
Fishy. And she was right, because she was told that she had to move out of, vacate the home, be responsible for finding an apartment and paying that rent along with the mortgage. Now, she's not living in the home, okay? And this is by Build It Back. And guess what? The neighbor did it. It just didn't work out. So she is happy that she stayed in the house with the mold, with everything, and she is still trying to, at great expense, recover from, that was a big hit from the surge that occurred from Superstorm Sandy. So now, even though the single mother has a job, you know, how could she recover? You cannot catch up. There's no catching up, you know, and it's tough.
Yeah, they need to take these case by case situations, because there's no way. And I don't understand how they expect for the people in this area to sustain themselves if they got to spend that kind of money. I don't understand.
Well, there is no sustainability. And also, who can you go to for help? There's no one, because of the magnitude of the disaster. And, you know, it was like a phenomenon. I mean, how do we gather up all the pieces and help people? It's impossible to make everyone comfortable. Okay, and there's a lot of suffrage.
Yeah.
So I would just recommend that you know, think about yourself, or try to reimagine what could happen if I physically lived there. Because it's okay to plan the future or accommodations for people who live in urban settings if you have never experienced life in that urban setting.
Right.
Not easy. Because when that disaster comes, there isn't going to be anyone there to help, hardly ever. Yes, the local electeds and community-based organizations will help. But how can you help someone when you need help yourself?
Yep.
Because you are residing in the area. If the airplane is going down and you have your child, who do you save first? You can't save the child. You have to think about yourself. So before you respond to the neighbor or the senior up the street to see
You gotta
what's
save
happening
yourself.
with that person, you have to start bailing that water out of your basement by any means necessary. So I would
Yeah.
just recommend that the human side be considered.
Thank you.
Sure. And thank you very much.
No,
Yes, thank you for bringing it to us today, Kate.
thank you.
I mean, we've been through this before because I had other people from the city planning do a presentation at my civic some years ago, maybe about 3 years ago. And then, like most of the residents there was like, how can they sustain themselves if the city don't do their part? First, the city must do their part. The city, the state, the federal government must do their part, and then the residents will do the rest. But right now, they're passing the bucks on to the homeowners. And if they would do their part with shoring up the waterfront, and making sure the infrastructure, the sewers is done properly, that'll be half of the problem right there. But they always want to pass the buck on to the homeowners. And that's something, Kate, that you could take back to them, because we are not going to stand by and do the work that the city should be doing when we pay our taxes. And we pay high taxes over here in Canarsie.
Thank you.
If anybody else has any questions? I think that's all the questions. I don't know.
Just want to say I'm sorry that I was tardy for joining the meeting. And Dorothy,
Me
thank
too.
you.
I had a hard time getting on, Judy.
No, I'm on a humanitarian mission in Barbados.
Oh.
Yeah, and when I got the email from Gotti, I must have told him that I wasn't sure if I was going to join the meeting. But I just came into my hotel room, and then Dorothy called. She always pays attention to detail. Thank you.
Yeah, she called me too, said, Maria, are you gonna come? I said, I'm trying to get on now, Dorothy. But
And
a few other people said that they still can't get on. I'm not sure.
You know what it was? We are used to putting in the
WebEx
6 numbers. And the only number we had to put in was number 1. That's what I had the problem with.
No, so I didn't have that. I just clicked and I got it.
Me too. So I'm not
I
sure.
was on the wrong meeting, so I was trying to get into the community board. But I just want to make a point.
Is this Grace?
It's Grace, yeah.
Hi, Grace.
Hi, Grace.
The thing is, now with COVID, it's like the wrong time to bring this up. You have to realize a lot of Canarsie residents are the first responders. That's
true.
What their job is. They're first responders. So they're in the front lines. A lot of people have lost their job as well because of this.
True.
And people are trying to pay their mortgage. So how are you going to now say, bring this on them right now? So that was mine.
Good point, Grace. Good point.
We had hoped to actually put this out for review in late February, early March, but then
COVID hit.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't think we're out of this for a while yet.
Oh.
So I think that, again, the residents in Canarsie are very hardworking people. It's not like they're millionaires. They're not. And they're
We making it. We trying to make it like
trying to make
everybody
it.
else.
Right. So to now start thinking about having to do this at this point, it's like almost an impossible feat.
It's impossible.
Point. Part of the reason we're trying to get it through now is because those temporary rules from 2013 and 2015, one set is expiring. It was set to expire in 2020. So we didn't want another next hurricane season to come without rules to fill that gap. But I understand point well taken.
Mother Nature has no barriers, boundaries, and I agree that, this is important also. I mean, everything is important. Yes, we are in the middle of COVID. It's a point well taken. And but we still have to address these issues because take, for instance, look at how crazy this hurricane season was continuing, rather. So I can't even speak about it in the past tense because we're still in the middle of hurricane season. Yeah. So I guess if we do it incrementally, with common sense and with precautions, we all could come to meet that common goal. But it will take several more planning sessions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But all the ancillary services must combine and agree, which could also be problematic. Human nature comes into being. But we should keep moving forward.
And I'm surprised we didn't have more people on this call because this is very important.
Mhm.
This is a very important subject, and we need to have everybody because later on when things start to happen, they're going to be like, I didn't know. And we need to get this here information out because people need to know what's coming down the pipe.
I agree.
We mentioned to Dorothy before the rest of the group got on, but we're going to have a recording of this that we can share with her to share with other board members. And if they or if any of you have questions later on, you can always get in touch with me, and I'm happy to answer questions.
But what about the community? I mean, the board members is fine, but then you still have a lot of board members that don't live in these areas, and they're going to be affected by it. So we need to get the community need to know about this.
Well, what happened is the reason why we didn't do a full board meeting about this topic is because it's not a public hearing. They just need a recommendation or a vote, but which is why we only opened it to the board members, and we would probably have Sal Calise next Wednesday go over this, but Sal has to work, so he wasn't able to attend tonight.
Okay.
So that's why we didn't do a full board meeting. And then not to mention our board meetings, as you guys already know how that goes. So it would be kind of hard to actually have them present and them answer questions because everyone is pretty much all over the place.
I agree with you, Dorothy. I think you did it right. You nailed it on this one. Even though we don't have the representation
that we need.
Yeah, and Kate, thank you so much for the recording. That helps. And you also have to realize not everyone is interested, right?
That's true.
Right, Maria? Yeah, not everyone is interested in these extensive, presentations for reasons, whatever reasons. So, and yes, Maria, we will hear Dorothy at the meetings. Oh, we didn't know about that. How come, yeah. But
some have said that some people said they had other virtual meetings tonight as well. So, which is why they couldn't attend also. So everybody's kind of all over the place.
Sure. Well, the recording will suffice.
And like Kate said, if anybody has questions, they could either send them to me or Kate, I guess, and have her address them.
Well, we're all zoomed out, but
Yeah.
but everything is important.
Yes.
All right. Yeah.
All right, Kate, I don't know, you or Thomas wants to take the floor?
Just if there are other questions, thank you for spending your free evening, especially all the way from Barbados. And like you said, we're all pretty zoomed out, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. Very good presentation.
Thanks. Let me know if you have any other questions.
Yes.
And, have a
Thank
good
you.
rest of the night.
Thank you all
Thanks,
for
Sally.
have a
Thank you
good
all.
night.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.